Okay, I'm testing the audio. I messed everything up yesterday. Looks like or sounds like I might have audio. Yeah, yeah, there we go. There we go. Ah. I do not actually have. Oh, important updates are pending. That's just what I want to have happen. No. There we go. Please don't. Please don't do this to me. I don't actually have a show plan for the day, but because we lost, we didn't win. We didn't win versus the mod we were trying to do last week, so I figured that we would kind of take it back from there. So since then, I've discovered that my test bench computer has all sorts of weird problems. So that was really the main issue. There were some issues with Windows and also the power supply. The HD Plex that I was using is actually a faulty one. For my faulty pile, usually I mark the problem on the back. I didn't get to it on this one. So I ended up wiring up a new power supply, and I had to make custom cables for it because I was missing it. It was a pain. It was a pain, of course it was. But the good news is our power supply, which I shouldn't be touching right now, our little Meanwell RSP200, worked fantastic. It powered that 2080 Ti no problem. And what was fascinating is the 2080 Ti is a just power hungry son of a gun. 254 watts was the highest recorded peak, and it pretty much just pulled 252 watts from the wall. And this little guy is only rated for 200 on air, but I actually ran that for upwards of 20 minutes at a time without any cooling whatsoever, which I wouldn't recommend, but I just was kind of curious. So it will definitely do it by itself, which is magnificent. But in the real world, I would want to get two of these guys, put them in the front frame rail of my Mini, and then have some kind of merger unit. And there's just no merger units that I know about out there, so I was going to ask you guys if you knew of any. J-Hack is reportedly thinking about working on one. And, of course, Compact has been thinking about working on one for a while, but we don't actually have a solution at the moment that I know of. It doesn't have to be 12 volts. It could be 24 volts because this power supply comes in a 24 volt form factor. I don't know if you can actually see it because I have the radiator and the pump all in the way. It's probably not smart to pick it up. I'm gonna electrocute myself. Maybe you can see it if I do this. I have to hold it there because there's some delay. So yeah, it's working, and I was gonna run some more test for you guys. This current system is the 1080 Ti with the i9 in it, and I just wanted to have an extra system to test it out. I wanted to see the difference between the 1080 Ti and the 2080 Ti as far as power consumption, and it's monstrous. It's a monstrous difference. Performance is actually pretty okay on the 2080 Ti, but it's not magnificently better. It's about basically like an overclocked 1080 Ti. That's basically what a 2080 Ti is in my testing. So let's do a little stress test for right now. So this setup right here, I've been working on that liquid cooled mini project for a while. The custom radiator that I've kind of chopped up, it's a car radiator or a oil cooler radiator, and I just have one low speed Noctua fan here kind of pushing it just to see if it was going to hold it stable, because if this can hold stable, then the concept will work. Brian Zoo is asking if I'm running the whole system at the PSU. No, just the 2080 Ti pulls 254 watts. Just the 2080 Ti. It's insane. The other part of the system is powered off a Dell brick. But the idea from last week, in case you guys are tuning in now and didn't watch last week, is you can fit two of these guys in the front of a Mini, right? And that can power your system brickless, and it will work. We have now proven it, at least I've proven it to myself, that it would totally work. But again, the ideal would be to have a merger unit. That way you don't have to overload this power supply by 55 watts, that you can pull some from the CPU power supply. So hello everybody. And Bella says, howdy, excuse you, that's our thing. What? What? Howdy's totally my thing. Totally. I mean, you can have it too, but it's totally my thing. I don't really have a lot more to talk about. I just kind of wanted to show that I did get this working, and it wasn't the fault of the power supply at all, or the graphics card. It was totally 100% that weird computer. But this will run forever. I ran this earlier today for 20 minutes in a hot room, and everything looked completely totally stable. The temperatures kind of peaked out at 80 on the MOSFETs back here behind the power supply, which is the hottest part of this power supply. It's actually the back. The front is actually okay. What I would do, of course, is I would put some thermal tape on those so it presses up against the aluminum of the Mini, so you have that entire front panel dissipating heat. I think it would work out really well. Carson Vid says this video needs cleaning. I mean, the video too, but the reservoir. Yeah, this is my first reservoir I ever purchased. I have no idea how old this guy is, but it's so nasty actually from the first build I did, the Eldritch build, which you can look at my website. And it basically just sat in a office building for 2.5 years, just getting nasty without being run. And then I went back and I actually bought it back from the people because they weren't using it. So that's why it's so nasty. But it's kind of like my old trusty reservoir, because if I ever have something nice, it goes in a build somewhere. But if I have something nasty, it can't go in a build, so it ends up being useful. Dysprosium says he has a question for me if I have the time. Of course, you can always send me an email, and I will definitely answer it. But if you want to ask it on air, I will try to answer it if it's a question I can ask on air. If you guys have any other questions, that would be really good for this video, because like I said, I don't have anything really planned. Right now, the graphics card is at 48 degrees Celsius, running Furmark, which is not bad for this setup, because this should have a lot less heat dissipation than a normal 240 radiator. This has a lot less ability to cool these components off. But this is partly because I don't think the radiator has reached part temp yet. It's still a fairly cool room. I ran the air conditioning unit before the video. It's starting to get a little bit warm. Pull my iPad out for you guys. I doubt this is gonna work, but let's give it a shot. Get a little toasty on our little power supply. Flip you over a little bit. Come on, baby. I don't want to touch you. You are going to be a spicy meatball. Okay. So I have this. I don't know if you can see that. No, it's pretty much going to be worthless, huh? But I can look at it. And it's so interesting too. I mean, I guess it's not so bad. This end of the radiator is a little bit cooler, even with the parts of the fan's not touching. But it gets to be pretty toasty on this side. So let's actually prove that if we can. Move that over a little bit. I'll check that in a second. All right, did the questions pop up? Abel Pisco says, how do you deal with the lack of storage space in ITX build? A pair of HDD 14 terabyte storage plus redundancy? I mean, if you need 14 terabytes of storage plus redundancy, my mini ITX, which I call Nano ITX, is definitely not going to be the solution for you. But in the Mini, you can easily fit, I mean, with this board, you have 3 M.2 slots. So that's up to 6 terabytes of NVMe storage. And then you can fit 2 2.5-inch drives that are 10 millimeters thick. Actually, it could go up to 12, but I don't know of any 12 millimeter drives. So you can have a decent amount of storage inside the unit. But for me, I mean, and my friends too, we used to like to put a lot of video on our computer systems, but now I just run network attached storage because I have all the videos that I make. And I love that. So much better because I build so many computers, I can just plug it right in or access it off the network, which makes a lot more sense than hauling around terabytes and terabytes of storage, for me anyway, on my system. Novantics asks, is this a passively cooled computer? Actually, pretty much right now it is a passively cooled computer. But actually the topic of the video is we were wiring up a custom power supply to power a 2080 Ti that could fit inside the Mini. And you would use 2 of these to power the system, but it actually is working pretty much off of one computer right now. But this is an i9 7080X 20. I'm having a mind breakdown. And a 1080 Ti. Johnny says, why are there no black versions of the S4? Well, there were black versions of the S4 at launch, but they sold out pretty quickly. As far as why are there not more, it was very difficult for me to come up with the right color. For the first run of the Mini ever, the S4 Mini, I should say, they were all black. They were powder coated with a black anodized aluminum bezel. And then for the second run, I got so many people saying, dude, we want a silver Mini. 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 So I was like, okay, I'll make half of them silver and half of them black. And then that was really hard for me to manage because it was very expensive for me to cut the process basically in half. It was complicated for me to deal with at the time as far as fulfilling orders. And then there wasn't as much demand as I thought for these split orders. So that's kind of the reason. The next run, I probably will do black. But at the end of the day, like, black is boring to me, and I think the silver minis are so nice. Like, I get them done at Lee & Lee, so the quality of the silver is just unbelievable. And it looks bad in pictures. It took me years and years and years to buy a Lee & Lee case way back in the day because I thought they looked so ugly with the Newegg thumbnails. But when I actually bought my first one, I was just blown away by what they looked like. But the reason for this radiator, again, is I'm making a custom Mini for a customer. I don't know if I'm going to pursue this design much further. It seems to be working, so it's definitely possible. But having this really slim side, it basically replaces the side of the Mini without growing it too much. And then there'll be some 80 millimeter fans in the front. I have to actually deflect air over the RAM, over the CPU block, back through the radiator. I don't know if it's going to work. I have to use a cereal box to prop it out. Right now I'm just using this system purely and totally just to test this graphics card, which caps out at about 211 watts. So that's just the graphics card, as opposed to the 2080 Ti, which I had running today, which caps out at like 255 watts. So that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous. Now, as far as the HDPlex 400 AC/DC, I actually did talk to Larry today, and he said that he is getting the 7th revision in. He's had a lot of trouble getting it right, which we want him to get it right. He's testing today, and if it does test out well, he is going to send that to me, so I might even have it by the end of this week, which means that I will be able to review it or look at it with you guys next Monday. So I'm pretty excited about that. Novantix asks, how does one commission a custom Mini? And are there rates or a lump sum? It really just depends. I try to be as affordable as possible, but when you're talking custom work and custom tooling, I mean, a custom Mini is a very expensive ordeal, and it only makes sense for people that are really super into it. I mean, it's very expensive. Like, not even talking about my engineering and all the time I've spent months on this project. Just the tooling from the manufacturer is going to be very expensive. So Hey, Abel, I'm not saying that you don't need it. I'm just saying that I don't need it. So, how often do you move your ATX case around? That's what I want to know. Because if you don't ever move it around, maybe network storage could work possibly, or at least attached storage, because you can get 3.1 version 2 controllers now, so you can edit right off the drives. That's what I do on my Mac, because I don't really have a lot of options now for video editing, but I can just use the Thunderbolt 3 port and plug right into my attached storage. Anyway, I'm interested in trying to run a game here and seeing what happens. This whole time it's been running, there's been no active cooling on this power supply, which is just amazing. And this is, again, the Meanwell RSP 200-12. I think that's right. Oh, I blew up another power supply earlier today, and it smells like burnt power supply in here. It's horrible. Horrible. I'd love to run PUBG if possible, but I have to do an update, maybe. I don't really... Why can't I log in? I've already been hacked? You guys have already hacked me? Okay. There we go. Now I gotta use my authenticator. Wrong one. I gotta get one of those aggregate authenticators because I have an authenticator for everything. It says never tell my password to anyone. Okay. I will try not to. I accidentally unplugged it. Okay. Yay. So for temperature right now, we're at a toasty 50 degrees Celsius on our i9, which is pretty good for the terrible cooling that we have right now. All right, we'll launch this when it is ready. Man, it still smells like... Well, it actually does kind of smell like burnt power supply. I might actually have to work on getting some cooling, in there at some point. Because we are probably at... Yeah, we're about 61 degrees Celsius. We're not doing anything right now. But we're fixing to do stuff. Come on, baby. Oh, I was so scared today earlier, though, when I blew up the power supply because I had it plugged into this system. Oh, I thought I just fried all that hardware. The 1080 Ti also is way more efficient in idle. I'm noticing that it's idling at 4 watts right now, whereas it was like 14 watts for the 2080 Ti. And a lot of times it would burst up to 40 just doing nothing. It's very odd. Sorry, the stream's bad. I think it's mostly because I'm downloading this. I could probably stop it. If I even knew how to do that. Which I don't. So we just might have to deal with it for a minute. Or close it off. Should get better in a second. Maybe. All right, I'm going to plug in the other system now. To show that it does indeed work and it's not some kind of voodoo. I'll shut this down. No. No, thank you. Please no update Windows. We don't need that right now. Oh, another interesting thing is this power supply. Very little coil whine. I could only get to coil whine audibly when we're running the 2080 Ti at a lower resolution, like 1080p. Then you could hear a little bit, but still pretty good. It's just fascinating. Fascinating solution. Very happy with it. Again, it may be all for naught because it looks like we may actually indeed get the HDPlex 400 AC/DC next week. Or at least I'll get one next week. But still. So many cables. This stupid pump I bought also had a SATA connection for the power, which is very inconvenient. I'll have to rewire that later. Alright, I think I got it all because I have to pick it up in one lump. Can I see anything that I might be missing? All right. This is so hot. Oh, it's hot. And again, that smell of burnt power supply, it's so terrifying. That goes there. This goes here. Plug that in. We'll wait for that one. I have a customer right now, speaking of cheapskates, and I don't really mean it in a mean way, but I'm having a hard time communicating because of a language barrier, that I can't make a custom computer case from scratch and put a 1080 Ti in it for less than $1,000 USD. Trying to explain that the parts are going to cost more than that. What was I doing? Oh, right. This sucker. So do you like this view, or do you like this view? Probably this view, so you can see the fans. Even if we have to kind of twist everything around. There we go. Alright, plug that guy in. Then we have... that was almost bad. Almost took my whole test bench down to the floor. I do not remember where the power switch is. This ASRock motherboard. I should never unplugged it. This should probably be easier this way. Maybe not plugged in. Yes. There we go. Sorry. No Winfill. I just send back the STX 160 to James, whose computer it was. I wish I still had that though. Bellis asks if I ever thought of writing a report regarding the design processes and methods of production for making a Mini, and I think that I probably will at some point when I stop making the Minis, which could be... I'll just restart it for now. On that note too, I don't know how many Minis I have left. I probably will sell out before Christmas, and then it will be half a year or more before I get new ones in, if I get new ones in. So just so you guys know. So now is basically the time to get one, is what I'm saying, if you were going to get one. Okay, so this is all running. This graphics card is running off this little Meanwell. And it is idling at 14 watts. Now it shoots up to 46, like I said before. I guess steam was popping up. And I shall run... I'll just run Valley. It's a good one. And I will put it at the max res of the system. So I can hear the power supply buzzing, as you guys might as well. But on my 4K monitor, it's a lot quieter. This is, I believe, running at 2560 by 1440. It may be a 1080p monitor, and I'm just upscaling it for Valley. I'm not sure. This is Craig's, along with his Vega 56 Nano, which is bad, which is a bummer. So we have to RMA that. White Moose asks, do I prefer external power bricks? And the answer is it depends. It's the right tool for the right job. Here's an example. I have a lot of business customers that have to install these things in the corporate environment, in the hospital and museums and that kind of thing. And they love having the external bricks because power supply is the #1 thing to fail, right? And they can just go and they can swap them out super, super easy. So I actually could have been building brickless systems for one particular customer who was putting them in a museum. And he said, no, I love the idea of having the external bricks. So please, let's do it that way, even though I had plenty of room to put them in there. I also kind of am okay with external bricks. A lot of people hate them because like, oh, it's just one more nasty thing to have on my computer. I want a nice, clean system. But the reality is, footprint on the desk is what matters most, and what matters to me, because you can have a brick and you can put it nice and neatly tucked underneath your desk and no one's going to see it, and have a really clean desk with a smaller footprint. I think that's really a good way to go. Now, if you can have a small system like the Mini with a power supply that's super tiny and there's no drawbacks, okay, great. But there usually is a drawback, and that usually is a footprint for the PC. Plus, it removes heat from the system that you can use to push your components a little bit further. I don't know if brickless is cheaper. SFX is cheaper. You know, standard power supplies are cheaper, so that's true. But not the way that we're doing it. This ends up being really expensive, making power supplies miniature. Abel asks a good question. What do I think about blower cards? I love the idea of them because the idea is it sucks air from the case and blows it out the back. But the reality is, even in a case like the Mini, where you have the sky slots which were designed by very talented engineers, it's not necessary. So it just ends up being louder. And you have this huge dead zone on your graphics card that you're actually not cooling, where the fan is going to be occupied. So it's not really an efficient use of space. I actually designed several prototypes of blower cards for Sapphire because they asked me to do their designs for this coming generation of cards, and one of them was a blower card. I don't think they're going to go with it. I like the way they look. I think they look awesome, but they don't perform as well as something like this. So on ultra settings, at 2560 by 1440. Oh wait, no. This was at 1080. That's invalidated. No wonder it's whining so bad. So let's put it 2560 by 1440. Oh, I have to hit cancel. That's kind of silly. Corey, are you hinting at your project that you made? That makes sense. Landon asks, I spoke last video about 12-volt merging units where I'm talking about having the barrel plug connectors merge into one so you could use 2 Dell 330 bricks to power one power supply. Yeah, sort of. I wouldn't use it for power bricks because there's already power bricks out there, or external bricks that can do the job. But internal bricks, like this guy right here, that is what I would think a merger unit would be awesome for. Because a merger unit would allow us to use 2 of these in a mini and have the merger unit dynamically load balance so we could pull as much as we need for the graphics card without overloading this unit. Because this unit's very tough. We can pull up to 250 watts with this guy in 4K, just the card alone, which is ridiculous. And this power supply is only rated for 200 watts without active cooling. So Meanwell really overbuilds their product, which is awesome. But we'd much rather have the extra overhead in case the graphics card needed a lot more juice. We don't want to bomb the system. So that's why a merging unit would be really awesome. But nobody makes any that are suitable, whether it be 24 volt or 16 to 24 volt or 12 volt. We got to get Compact Design or J-Hack to make one. And Bella says, what majors do you think would be most useful for those going into case component development? Mechanical engineering? I don't know. Maybe mechanical engineering would be good, but really I think just good old-fashioned trade school would probably be best. Just learn how a factory works sheet metal. There's a lot that you can learn just from doing stuff like that. Just the internet, to be honest. Mechanical engineering is great, though, because you do get a huge set of skills and a way of thinking that you can approach problems with. I wish I did something useful, but I went into information systems and computer science, which I never used. Abel asks a great question. Where do you think computing is going to go? I heard you say a few years back that components were going to get smaller and smaller and consuming less and less energy, but it seems the industry flipped, more cores, more watts. I do believe that overall we're going to get more and more efficient hardware, and last generation we saw that. I think that Intel and NVIDIA they're pressing their advantage, and this could be total nonsense. This is just what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they're pressing their advantage now. They're not releasing their next-gen stuff because they're on par or ahead of AMD a little tiny bit. They have a lot of stuff they want to use up. I think that RTX is basically what we had last year, but they added some Quattro features on it to make it look not so the same, and they just overclocked it a little bit. I mean, that's basically what I see for the i9 and for this. It's just cheaper for them to make it more power hungry and get a little bit of boost of power. But I think overall we're going to get smaller and smaller. I mean, last year was amazing. The last 2 years were amazing. The 10 series, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Creeper says, I'm sure I've seen 4-liter-ish flex-based computer systems. I hate the flex-based power supply. That could be a topic of an entire video, but I think this is probably good as any time to talk about it. Flex power supplies, if you spend time inside a computer environment, modeling everything up and trying to use every single possible position, there's no good place for a flex power supply. It ends up being incredibly inefficient. If you put it on, for mini ITX, if you put it on this side, the CPU side, then you're blocking the ability to jet air out of the chassis, which is no good. right? And that's where they're designed to be put because they can reach the 24 pin, they can reach the graphics card pinout. But then again, you have terrible cooling solutions for Mini ITX. You can't put it into the front because you have the plugs jutting right into your graphics card, which is no good. And then you have the back-end power connector, which takes up 30 millimeters of space that you're gonna have to route somewhere else. So you can't put it in the front. You can't put it underneath the graphics card because you're not gonna be able to run the 24-pin connector up easily to your motherboard. And also, if you have the GPU in the same location that's cheap for manufacturers to do, well, you're gonna be blocking the fan ports on it. And if you can put it underneath the motherboard, which I have seen some options to do, and you can have some drives underneath it, you run into the problem again of where do you put the wires, but you're also making the case a lot thicker than you need to. There's just no good place to put a flex power supply, and I have so tried because I like the idea of them. They're cheap, and then you can also buy custom modded ones with breakout modular cables, which are expensive, but I like things pretty. But there's just so many reasons I don't like them, and they're not very efficient compared to doing things the way that I do here with the DC-DC power supplies. So they end up being kind of loud because you're going to need some active cooling for them. So those are some of the reasons I don't like them for a Mini ITX. Jim Bond says, worried about heating your home? Get a 9900K. All the 9000 series Intel CPUs are ridiculous. I think I answered your question, Bellis, or my thoughts anyways, on Flex ATX. What's Up says, is there a guide somewhere in the small form factor forum that explains all this power supply stuff? This seems to be the only thing I'm hesitant about. Yeah, there's tons and tons of them. There's hundreds and hundreds of posts actually regarding it. I have a couple TLDR posts. In the first post of the mini thread, I have an FAQ where I talk about the power supplies. But very basically, what I do for the mini is I use a power supply that's broken into two components. If you go buy a standard power supply off of Amazon or whatever, you're going to be buying an ATX power supply or an SFX power supply. But basically what it is an AC, DC power supply and distributor all in one, right? That's what a power supply is. It takes AC from the wall, converts it to DC into various voltages your computer needs, the 5 volt, 3 volt, etc., 12 volt, which is the big one, and then it makes sure everything's nice and clean. So what I do, because you don't want a big square box, is I break it into two components. The AC DC portion, which takes the AC from the wall and converts it to DC, and then a DC-DC distributor board, like this tiny little Pico power supply. I'll get one for you. That way I have a prop. Okay. Where are we? Where's the one I melted today? Okay, this is a tiny flex power supply, right? Tiny flex power supply. This is an AC-DC power supply. This is very, very tiny for an AC-DC power supply because usually you'd have the big square ones, right? So this does everything that you're used to having it do for your computer. I'm saying that no, I would much prefer to have this be a smaller brick like this. This is an AC-DC power supply, but there's no way to plug this into my computer. So I have a distributor board, which is usually called a DC-DC power supply, which will plug into this, and this will plug into the computer. So that's basically the gist of it. And there's a lot of different options for buying these things. And I also recommend the ones I like and have tested very well on my website. nfc-systems.com/BOMS. You can hear the coil whine, like I said. It's running at 1920 by 1080. And the microphone is a very good microphone, and it's right underneath it. So if you're running at 4K, it's a lot quieter. I think this is just a 1080p monitor, so there's no way I'm... going to be able to get to go better. So the less you work a power supply, the louder it's going to be for doing stuff like this. The R9 Nano was extremely bad too, because unless you loaded it up all the way with anti-aliasing and oversampling, the power supply would usually just crash straight up from the factory. Plus, if you're running at a high resolution and this was inside the computer case, it'd be fine. This fan right now, this motherboard is whacked up, so that's why this CPU fan's running so loud. And this is a torture test. No cooling and no aluminum heatsink on the back MOSFETs, and it's at 119 degrees Celsius, but it still hasn't crashed yet. So I would at 254 watts. It's only rated for 200 watts with active cooling, and it has no active cooling. I took the case out of it, so it doesn't even have that, and it's running ridiculous 50% over its recommended load. Golly, the back plate for the RTX is at 62 degrees Celsius. It'll burn your knuckle off. If we're going to play some video games, Corey, I can stop right now. We down for some Civ? You'd probably say yes, and then you wouldn't do it. Make me sad. What's a Ross man? I don't really have anything special to talk about an APU computer case. I'm like I said, I'm thinking about it, but I got to do it. I don't know what I'm going to do about computer cases in general right now. I want to make something affordable and easy to produce that I can customize simply, rather than doing something super, super high end like the Mini. That's what I'd like to do. I don't see how Lewis, though, fits into the conversation. I missed it. I don't know. Now, Techno Boom, I understand how Techno Boom fits into the conversation. I know who Louis Rossman is. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you guys were referring to Louis Rossman, but I watch his channel. It's also really interesting, too, watching Right to Repair courtroom proceedings and seeing him in the back taking notes. BOM stands for Bill of Material Sheet. Oh, that looks awesome, Corey. That's super beautiful. I wonder what material you used for those legs, though, because I can just see it folding over underneath the weight. All right. What other questions can we get out of the way? Because I don't really have anything to talk about. This was a success, so you can make it work. Hopefully won't need to make it work because we'll have the HDPlex 4. Actually, no. This is your only solution for a 1080 Ti in a Mini, because you can't fit the HDPlex 400 in there. This would even be a tight fit, but I think you can make it possible. There's no RTX cards available this second, but Zotac has announced that it will be making a 2080 Mini that will fit inside the Mini. I don't know what kind of phone I have. I'm not a phone guy. My dad gave this to me, and I gave my iPhone to my mother-in-law because she got bought an Apple Watch, and since I don't really care what kind of phone I have, it is a Huawei but I don't know what model number. I will say that the camera on it is amazing. Scary amazing. But I'm totally not a phone guy. I would look like a retard if I tried to talk about a phone. I'd look more like a retard. Yeah, you can undervolt your graphics card to get rid of coil whine, but another solution is work your graphics card harder. Coil whine means you're not working your graphics card fast enough, in my experience. I've actually have never found something to contradict that statement. If you hear coil whine, you're not pushing your graphics card hard enough. So, quick, easy thing to do is usually increasing anti-aliasing. That seems to make coil whine better. All right, what I'm going to do now to prove to you that this is actually working, it's been working this whole time, is I'm going to unplug this little guy, and you can watch in real time graphics card bomb. But here it is. This is the Meanwell 200 RSP 200-12, and you can buy it now. It's actually very cheap, and you can use it for your brickless builds. I totally approve. The one on the forum everybody is using is, somebody want to help me out? I can't think of the model number before it, but it's basically an enclosed version of this, and it's much longer, much longer. It fits great in the Mini. It works amazing, but you can only, of course, run maybe 250 watts through it. So total. So you're kind of maybe looking at maybe a 1060, maybe, if you use that build, which is not bad. Not bad at all. But you're not going to be powering a 1070 off of it. But this is small enough to where you can use two. That's the cool thing. Or the hot thing. Because it's very hot right now. Ridiculously hot right now. Well, I believe that was up. But I don't believe it's just the Huawei. I believe it's basically every single electronic product made in China, which is every single electronic product. Maybe some worse than others, but that's just how it works. How China works for manufacturing, how I've discovered, because I've been doing manufacturing there with them, is that you will have several different tiers. It looks like a pyramid. You'll have one major factory, and that's sponsored by the state. And then underneath that, you have two companies that work on getting jobs for that factory out. And then you have underneath that a bunch of different companies which represent those two companies, which will stand in front of the factory and claim it's their factory. But really, at the end of the day, everything goes through that one major factory, one way, shape, or another, for electronics production. And because that one factory is state-sponsored, you know, I'm not so sure that IP is being protected in all regards. What is the negative of a long riser card in chassis? The performance does drop, and it starts to drop pretty strongly after a little bit, as far as measured performance, as far as the measure the performance that you can measure with the card, the performance will drop. However, the end result in the real world may or may not be negligible to you. The big thing is interference, and you can get weird crashes and some weird things happening the longer that your riser is, because there's crosstalk and signal degradation and other stuff like that. But mostly instability is my answer. But at 30 centimeters, I think you're going to be fine, especially if you're going with a good riser, like from Lee Heat. So it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's awesome. It's awesome working the small form factor field, because when I started making the Mini, there were not risers out there for PCI graphics cards, and there wasn't anything good. But now we've conquered that, right? Risers are no longer an issue. They're an everyday thing, and there's many companies that make good ones, Leahy makes some of the best ones, and they make them in all different shapes and sizes. And they're a partner with the Mini, so if you want something that's compatible, you just go to their website and choose something with the Mini. So it's really, really awesome, because I used to had to work with ADATA and Amerirac and Apex Electronics and ADEX Electronics, working with different bigger companies, ordering stuff just to get them to develop, compete, and make a riser. It was really interesting how I got them to fight each other and actually make something good. I don't have some of my original cables, but this is one of the first ones. This is a PCIe 16X riser, one of the very first ones that was out there. And it was garbage, but at least I got it made. And then we had one that looked more or less like this, but was a PCIe 16X, and that was made by ADEX, and it was pretty darn good. And then I threw Amerirac into the mix, and Amerirac made another one that kind of looked like this, which I don't have. And then, of course, HD Plex had been making their flexible silicon risers. And then you had the company that did Thermal Takes riser, which is really bad and had all those problems, and Lee and Lee had to have a big old recall. And then these guys came out. I actually might not be allowed to talk about these guys yet, but whatever, because Lee Heat makes really awesome ones. Their latest ones are just top notch. So my risers are made by HD Plex for the Mini. I really like them because they are the smallest Anyway, it's been an hour. I didn't really say anything important anyways, but definitely check out the Meanwell RSP 200-12. This is a cool power supply, and it will work great for any project that you have, not just a brickless Mini, but it is built as tough as nails. It's really tiny, great product. It's very inexpensive as well. So glad that we were able to at least figure that out from last week and get this 2080 Ti powered for the video. I don't have anything else, I'm sorry, but hopefully, it's cross our fingers. I said this like 5 weeks in a row now, that next week is the HD Plex 400 week. So I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining the stream. I'm going to go harass Corey and get him to get his computer together, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.